Welcome back. We're in the deep end today on control, change, and those weird body signals that run our lives.
And why goals fail when you skip the part where you admit where you actually are.
That body part is wild to me, because people think they're making decisions with logic.
They're mostly making them from discomfort, fear, and habit before logic even shows up.
So the brain is basically getting the memo after the body already signed the contract.
Exactly. And then we act shocked when we keep repeating the same messy choices.
But people hate hearing that because it removes the sexy story of being in control.
I think it actually gives you more control because now you know what to work with.
Right. Because then you can stop pretending motivation is going to save you.
Motivation is a terrible employee. It never shows up on time.
That is such a brutal sentence, but it feels true.
You do the thing because you decided, not because you felt magnificent.
That's the part people resist, because they want the mood before the action.
And life does not care about your mood, unfortunately.
Damn, that was cold and accurate.
It's liberating, though, because you can be tired, scared, annoyed, and still move.
So when you talk about being dragged versus driven, what's the difference in your mind?
Dragged is when your pain is running the show and you're not choosing it.
And driven is when you finally take the wheel from whatever was chasing you.
Exactly. And a lot of people only get honest after the old strategy fails.
That's the uncomfortable truth, right? That suffering can become a prerequisite for clarity.
It often is because people keep proving to themselves that the current setup doesn't work.
So your life becomes a very expensive experiment in denial.
Yes, and the bill eventually arrives.
I keep thinking about how much of this is really nervous system stuff.
It's a lot of nervous system stuff, and that's why talk alone is not enough for many people.
Because you can understand the pattern and still not change it.
Right. You can understand it and still get hijacked by the sensation in your body.
That explains so many people who sound self-aware but keep self-destructing.
Awareness is a start. Regulation is the bridge, and behavior is the evidence.
That's a clean framework, and it makes the work feel more practical.
It is practical because you cannot think your way out of a body that is alarmed.
That's the line that lands, honestly. Because a lot of people live in alarm.
And they normalize it, which makes it harder to see what's actually happening.
Okay, then let's get into the thing everyone talks about, the let them idea.
The fastest way to take control of your life is to stop controlling everybody else.
That sounds simple enough to be offensive.
It is offensive to the part of us that loves being right.
But why does that actually work psychologically?
Because when you stop managing other people, you stop wasting energy on what you cannot change.
But people hear that and think it means becoming passive.
It does not mean passive, it means strategic.
So you still say the truth, still set boundaries, still intervene when it's dangerous.
Absolutely. If someone is unsafe, abusive, or driving drunk, you step in.
Good, because otherwise that would be a very expensive philosophy.
Exactly. There are guardrails. This is not chaos with good branding.
Chaos with good branding is actually how a lot of people date.
That is annoyingly accurate.
What I find interesting is the emotional hook part, because that's where people get trapped.
Yes, the second you obsess about what someone else is doing, you lose yourself.
And you think you're focused on them, but really you're feeding your own anxiety.
Exactly, and then you call it care when it's actually control.
Oof, that hurts because it's usually true.
It's also freeing, because once you see it, you can pull your energy back.
And when you pull it back, you suddenly see what you actually want.
That's the hidden gift, because the thing that annoys you is often the thing you need to work on.
Like if your friend didn't invite you to brunch, the real question is not brunch.
It is almost never brunch. It is usually belonging.
Brunch is just the shiny wrapper on a wound.
That's a terrible sentence and a very good one.
But isn't there a danger of people using let them to avoid hard conversations?
Not if they understand the point, because the goal is peace, not avoidance.
Still, some people will absolutely weaponize this into detachment.
Sure, but people can weaponize therapy language too. That doesn't make the tool bad.
Fair, humans can make a mess out of anything shiny.
The key is responsibility, because let them always circles you back to your side of the street.
And that's the part that feels selfless and selfish at the same time.
I think it is generous because you stop robbing people of their own experience.
That's powerful because overhelping can become another form of control.
Exactly, and overfunctioning often keeps everyone stuck.
That's a hard one. because people feel useful when they're fixing everybody.
And then they call themselves exhausted and resentful, which is the receipt.
The receipt is crazy because it always shows up.
That's why I like the distinction between goals and dreams.
Yeah, because one is directional and the other is like a signal flare.
Exactly, goals are the next steps, and dreams are the far-off compass point.
And you start with where you are, not where you pretend you are.
Yes, because you cannot map a route without the starting point.
Most people write goals like they're ordering a personality online.
That is exactly what it looks like sometimes.
So the audit matters more than the ambition at first.
It does, because if your health is a 2, the first win is getting to a 4.
That makes goals feel less like fantasy and more like engineering.
That's a good word for it because it's built one decision at a time.
And then the dream piece is where jealousy becomes useful.
Jealousy is just blocked desire, and it tells you where your attention belongs.
That is such a better use of jealousy than pretending you're above it.
Pretending you are above it is usually just shame with better posture.
Shame with better posture is a phenomenal line.
It helps to ask what exactly you want, because it is rarely the surface stuff.
It's never just the car or the house, it's usually peace or belonging or freedom.
Right, the object is just the costume for the deeper desire.
And that's where the whole conversation loops back to courage.
Yes, because once you know what you want, you still have to risk changing.
Which is why people stay stuck. Because staying is painful but familiar.
And change is painful too, but eventually the pain of staying wins.
That line hits because it explains so much human behavior.
It does, and once you see that, you stop waiting for permission to move.
That is a great place to land for today because this could spiral into a 3-hour therapy session.
And we would probably enjoy that too much.
We absolutely would, unfortunately.
Next time, we should keep going on what actually breaks the cycle.
Yes, and I want to talk about how people start trusting themselves again.
Perfect, because that is where the real change starts.
All right, we'll pick this up in the next one.
Episode 3 is going to get even more practical, and probably more honest.
Welcome back, because this one gets into why people stay stuck and how they finally move.
We are basically talking about control, fear, and the weird ways emotions run the show.
That part is so annoying because everybody thinks they are making smart decisions.
And then the body says, nope, I do not feel like it, and the plan dies there.
That is brutal because it is not even a dramatic failure, it is just inertia.
Exactly, and people call it lack of discipline when it is often just fear in a trench coat.
Fear in a trench coat is a very expensive outfit, by the way.
It really is, and most of us are paying rent for that outfit.
What I keep thinking about is the difference between being driven and being dragged.
A lot of people are dragged by shame, other people's opinions, or old wounds.
So the motor is running, but the steering wheel belongs to somebody else.
Yes, and the wake-up call usually comes when the strategy stops working.
That sounds like the moment people suddenly get honest with themselves.
It usually takes pain because comfort can keep people asleep for years.
That is depressing but also terrifyingly true.
The good news is that once you see it, you can start choosing instead of reacting.
That is the big shift, right? From autopilot to actual authorship.
Yes, and the first place that shows up is in your daily behavior.
Which means you can know the right thing and still not do it.
Exactly, because knowledge is not the problem, regulation is.
So all those people saying they just need more motivation are basically missing the point.
Motivation is wildly unreliable and has a terrible attendance record.
That should be printed on a mug and sold at airports.
It would sell, because everyone is secretly exhausted by their own waiting.
What I love about your framing is that it is not feel better first, it is act first.
Right, behavior first can create the feeling you are waiting for.
Like you do not wait to become the person, you start performing as that person.
And then your nervous system slowly catches up, which is the part people skip.
Wait, so the body is basically the slowest student in the room?
The body is an excellent student, it just hates your speeches.
That is a perfect line, because talking ourselves into change is our favorite hobby.
And it rarely works if the internal state is still screaming danger.
That is why your point about negative feelings matters so much, right?
Yes, because those feelings are information that something in your life is off.
Which is inconvenient, because then you cannot keep pretending everything is fine.
Correct. The pretending is very emotionally expensive.
Okay, let's go into the control piece because that one feels like the real addiction.
It is, and most people do not realize how much energy they waste managing everyone else.
We are all basically unpaid managers of other people's bad decisions.
And terrible managers because nobody asked for the job.
So when you say let them, it is not passivity, it is reclaiming attention.
Exactly, it is not apathy, it is redirection.
That distinction matters because people hear it and think you are saying become numb.
I am saying notice the reaction, and then stop giving your life away to it.
The prom story makes it so tangible because the control instinct sounds almost parental and noble.
It felt noble until the rain, the taco stand, and my daughter called me out.
The taco stand was the hero of that story, honestly.
That ridiculous taco stand taught me more about freedom than a lot of books did.
Because the bigger lesson is that their experience was theirs, not yours to optimize.
Yes, and the minute you relax your grip, you get your own life back.
But people hear that and immediately worry they are becoming selfish.
I think it is one of the most generous things you can do.
Because you are not robbing them of their consequences.
And you are not making yourself responsible for their emotions.
That is a huge burden to stop carrying.
It is, and it reveals your own patterns when you stop outsourcing your peace.
Like jealousy, resentment, and all those tiny emotional hooks you normally ignore.
Yes, and those hooks are clues, not character flaws.
That is actually a really useful reframe because it removes a lot of shame.
Shame makes people hide, but curiosity makes people change.
I also keep thinking about the exceptions because this cannot mean ignoring real danger.
Of course not. If something is unsafe or destructive, you step in.
So the rule is not do nothing. It is do not try to control what is not yours.
Exactly, and that is where values come in because then your action is clean.
Clean meaning you are not acting out of manipulation or obligation.
Right, you are acting from who you are, not from fear of what they will do.
That also sounds way less exhausting than being everybody's emotional thermostat.
It is less exhausting, and it leaves you with enough energy to build your own life.
Which brings us back to goals, because if you are not clear, you just drift.
Yes, and the first mistake is setting goals without knowing your starting point.
People love skipping that part because it feels too honest.
But honesty is what makes direction possible.
So the audit is basically, where am I actually, not where do I wish I was.
Exactly, then you can ask, how do I move this number up 2 points?
That is such a better question than inventing some heroic fantasy version of yourself.
Heroic fantasy selves are very photogenic and usually unhelpful.
Very expensive in notebooks too because everybody loves a fresh start journal.
And then the journal becomes a museum of good intentions.
I also love the piece about dreams because goals feel practical and dreams feel almost embarrassing.
Dreams matter because they point your inner compass somewhere real.
And jealousy is part of that compass, even though people hate admitting it.
Jealousy is blocked desire, and that is why it is so useful.
That is wild because it turns a dirty feeling into data.
Exactly, and once you name what you want, you can stop pretending you do not care.
So the whole thing is less about becoming someone else and more about finally listening.
That is the whole game, listening, deciding, and then repeating the behavior.
That is such a cleaner way to think about change than the usual motivational noise.
And it is a lot kinder, because it stops making you the enemy.
Which is probably why it lands so hard with people, because they are tired of fighting themselves.
Exactly, and when that fight gets quieter, life gets louder.
All right, that is a very good place to pause before we keep spiraling deeper.
We would absolutely keep spiraling if you let us.
Unfortunately, I think the audience would stay for every minute of it.
Thanks for hanging with us, and we will keep building on this next time.
Episode 3 is where we get even more practical and probably even more real. Welcome back. We are still in the mess of change, control, and that weird little phrase, let them.
This episode is really about why people know what to do and still do the opposite.
That is the part that hurts because it is not ignorance. It is friction.
It is the body saying, I do not feel like it, long before the brain gets a vote.
So the brain is basically arriving late to its own life.
Honestly, yes, and then it writes a long explanation afterward.
That is brutal because people love saying they are rational when they are mostly reactive.
Right, and that reaction gets hardwired into habits, fear, and old coping.
So when you say people are dragged, You mean they are being pulled by pain?
Sometimes shame, sometimes fear, sometimes other people's expectations, and often all three.
That is such an ugly motivational stack, but it is probably accurate.
It is not cute, but it is common.
And the wild thing is, people still call that ambition when it is actually anxiety.
Exactly, and once you see that, you can start taking the wheel back.
But the wheel back is hard when your whole identity was built on proving something.
It is hard, and that is why change usually starts when staying the same hurts more.
That line is nasty in the best way because it is so true.
It is not meant to be comforting, it is meant to be honest.
Okay, let me go straight at the let them thing because that one explodes people's brains.
Good, because it is simple and people still manage to overcomplicate it.
Your claim is basically that controlling other people is the fastest way to lose your peace.
Yes, because every second you spend managing them is energy you are stealing from yourself.
But people will hear that and think, so I should just stop caring?
No, you care deeply. You just stop trying to own what is not yours.
That distinction matters because indifference is lazy, and this feels more disciplined.
Exactly, and discipline here is noticing your hook before you get dragged into drama.
The hook image is so real because everyone knows that one person who reels them in.
Oh, we all have multiple hooks, unfortunately.
The scary part is how often the hook is disguised as love or responsibility.
That is the trap, because you convince yourself control is care.
And then you are exhausted, resentful, and somehow still calling it being a good person.
Correct, and also deeply miserable.
Great lifestyle brand, by the way.
Huge market, terrible customer satisfaction.
The prom story is where I think people finally get it, because it is so absurdly human.
It was the perfect example, because I was fully ready to manage everything.
You were trying to run the entire prom like a military operation.
I absolutely was, and my daughter shut it down in one sentence.
The funny part is this chaos was not even dangerous, just inconvenient.
Exactly, but I was acting like inconvenience was an emergency.
That is basically the modern human condition.
It really is, and let them gave me a way to unclench.
Is the real power there that it interrupts the emotional spiral?
Yes, because it names what is happening instead of pretending you are fine.
That feels important, because denial just keeps the body tense.
Exactly, and once you stop wrestling them, you finally see yourself again.
So if my friends go to brunch without me and I get annoyed, that is information.
It is information, and then you ask why it matters so much to you.
Which is annoyingly adult because now I have homework instead of drama.
Exactly, you do not get to just perform outrage and leave.
That is rude but fair.
And often the answer is not, they are evil. It is, I feel excluded.
Which means the problem is not the brunch, it is the wound under it.
Usually, yes, and that is where the work begins.
That is such a good point because people love making the surface event the villain.
The surface event is just the trigger, not the whole story.
And this is where I want to push a little, because what about real harm?
There are exceptions, and if something is dangerous, discriminatory, or destructive, you step in.
So let them is not passive, it is selective.
Exactly, it is not abandon the room and hope for the best.
Thank you, because some people would absolutely turn this into a slogan for neglect.
People will misuse anything if it helps them avoid responsibility.
The really interesting part to me is how selfish this sounds on the surface.
And I think it is one of the most generous things you can do.
That sounds backwards unless you separate control from care.
Yes, because when you stop micromanaging people, you stop robbing them of their own growth.
And you stop robbing yourself of your own life, which is the part people miss.
That is exactly it.
The thing I keep coming back to is your point about self-worth being tied to achievement.
So many people were rewarded for performing, not for being.
Which means ambition can become a hostage situation pretty fast.
That is an accurate and horrifying sentence.
Thank you. I try to keep the metaphors mildly traumatic.
But it is true, and that is why people need an audit before a goal sheet.
The starting point matters more than the fantasy destination.
Completely, because you cannot give directions without knowing where you are.
That is actually such a clean framework. Just rank the categories and be honest.
It is simple on purpose, because clarity is more useful than performative complexity.
And people hate simple because simple removes their excuses.
It does, and people are very attached to their excuses.
I also love the jealousy angle because that is way more revealing than inspiration sometimes.
Jealousy is just blocked desire, and people usually know that instantly.
That is almost unfair because jealousy tells on you before you are ready.
It does, but it also shows you what your real dream is.
So instead of shaming the jealousy, you mine it.
Exactly. You ask what it is pointing at and what you have been denying.
That is a much better use of envy than just being bitter online.
Bitter online is a very expensive hobby.
I want to circle back to change, because your point about not liking the action is so freeing.
You do not need to love the behavior to do the behavior.
Which is huge because people wait for the feeling first and then never move.
Right, and the behavior comes first if you want the feeling to change.
That is the part everybody resists, because it sounds too unglamorous to work.
And yet, it is how your life actually changes.
The consistency is almost boring, but boring is where the freedom lives.
Yes, and you build trust with yourself in that boring repetition.
That feels like the real takeaway here, not motivation, but self-trust.
I think so, because once you trust yourself, you stop outsourcing your life.
That is a hell of a place to land.
It is, and it is a relief when people finally get there.
I feel like we could stay here all day and keep slicing this one in different ways.
We probably would if the audience did not have places to be.
Fair enough. We should not let them miss their own lives.
Look at you bringing it full circle.
Thanks for hanging with us, and we are just getting into the practical part.
Episode 3 gets even sharper, and probably a little more uncomfortable in the best way.